Hey there, we are going live and I want to add a picture for us here. So let's see, can we move? I think you can read it pretty well. We're going to talk about cultivating central nervous connectivity and what exactly this means and how we do this in functional neurologic disorders as well as many other disorders. So this little graphic, by the way, this is part of our CCC course, or Cultivating Central Nervous System Connectivity course, which, by the way, is our biggest weekend course. It's coming up in October, and we are super excited. It has, for this last week, we have had our early bird pricing for this course. We have a bunch of people who've signed up for it. So if you are a PT or OT or other healthcare provider looking for a course in functional neurologic disorders, this is the course. It's a weekend course. We're doing it live at our Torrance studio and online. So you can get early bird through tonight, by the way. But that is where this figure comes from. And this particular figure was one of the outcomes of many brainstorm sessions with the amazing Brittany Kim. As we were putting together this course, we really got inspired by plants and the idea of what it takes to really cultivate a garden. And then relating that to our nervous system. So I'm going to walk you through each of the pieces here on this diagram and talk about why each are very important when it comes to any type of functional neurologic disorder. So this can be weakness, tremor, dystonia, it could be dizziness, it could be a functional dizziness like 3PD. All of these pieces we take into consideration when helping a person recover. So let's start. I actually like to start at the base, and that is the soil. So most people who garden know that the composition of the soil is very important and will basically kind of be a do or die for a lot of things. And so same thing with our brain. And if we want to drive positive neuroplasticity, we need a soil that is optimized with the right ingredients for that. And what are some of those ingredients? Sleep is one of them. So we know sleep deprivation can even be a trigger for a functional neurologic disorder. So building up a sleep reserve is a very important part, having great sleep hygiene as well. So that is one piece of our soil component. That as we build up here, our systemic health, so our immune system health, our cardiac health, our autonomic health is part of that cardiac part of the autonomic component. Oh my gosh, influence on our cardiac system, our cardiopulmonary system. Wow, that took me way too many words to get out. Our nutrition, also part of our systemic health. So all of these things we want to consider optimizing. So sleep, systemic health. The other component of that is our sense of safety and overall stress arousal. We know that if our stress arousal is really high, that's actually going to activate portions of our autonomic nervous system that can send neuroplasticity down the wrong path. Quite honestly. So we want to optimize that as well. And our overall fitness level. This is shown up in the literature as key components of a lot of interdisciplinary rehabilitation approaches for neurologic disorders is that overall level of fitness. One, we know it builds the systemic health, it builds our cardiac health, our autonomic, which all basically feed the brain, right? So if we have better blood flow to the brain, we have better opportunity for neuroplasticity. So that is our soil. We're going to optimize it for neuroplasticity. Let's go around the figure here. So watering. So we know all plants most plants actually, unless you're in the desert, they need quite a bit of water and they need the right amount. So actually the desert is a really good analogy. I have some succulents out here in my yard. They need less water than my avocado tree. And if I watered them the same, so if I did the same treatment with every person with a functional neurologic disorder, it wouldn't work. I would give too much sensory input and information to one person and not enough to another. So we think of the watering, that sprinkling in of sensory input, and this can be all sensory inputs: visual, vestibular, sound. It could be just our proprioception and our light touch. It could be our taste and smell. So all of those pieces, we want to dose in just the right amount. And what I have found is when maybe I have not had the best outcome with a person, it's often because I'm not watering the right amount. I'm overdosing or underdosing some of that sensory input. So that's our watering can. Next up is the pruning. And actually, I think this is the most important part. When we're talking neuroplasticity, and when I imagine neurons in the brain coming together, wiring together, firing together, I really imagine them much like branches growing on a tree and making connections. That's what's happening in our nervous system. And in a functional neurologic disorder, in functional dizziness, in 3PD, what we see is that those connections have actually gone awry and they're producing an abnormal movement pattern or abnormal sensations or even pain. And so we actually need to cut and prune down some of those connections so that new positive connections can be made. Positive meaning in a positive neuroplasticity changes. So that's our pruning process. Now, a couple of things that we also have to think about, and we cannot underestimate the influence of the weather, right? So right now, in a lot of the country, there's really dry weather. In California, there's a drought. It's really changing our landscape. And actually right now there's a drought, so we turn down our sprinklers on our grass and it's kind of brown. Just like in our garden, our weather, our environment, the context around us has a really big impact on our nervous system. So we have to consider these things as well. So what's the person's culture, the beliefs about the disorder, what is their social and physical context? How am I playing into this? So this is one of the biggest things that I've been really interested in and looking at the literature and understanding is, how do I become part of that environment? And how might I understand my own beliefs and own thoughts about the person in front of me, what they're experiencing, about their diagnosis, and how does that influence the outcome? It can have a really big outcome or really big influence. And if we're not aware, we're not even aware of how we're influencing the environment. So this is something that I think is really important as a therapist, is to understand ourselves so that we can understand our influence as part of the person's environment. And then finally, that compost bag. So I don't know if you're like me, but you got a compost bin outside. We have a worm composter, and I love being able to just put all of our scraps in there, and the worms have a heyday. And then we have this beautiful compost tea that we pour on our avocado tree, and it's really great. It helps the tree grow and blossom and fruit, and as you can see here, we even have blossoms on our brain. If you can see those beautiful brain flowers, that's what we want to see when neuroplasticity goes in that positive direction. So what might that compost be that we're pouring onto the soil? This can be many different things, but I often think about it as building additional resources for a person and addressing the underlying issues. So a lot of times when somebody comes to me and they have a functional neurologic disorder or they have 3PD, we want to screen the initial pieces of that. So often with a functional neurologic disorder, it might have been triggered by a physical event. So maybe a concussion or a broken arm or leg or something like that. So I want to investigate that underlying piece and ensure that there's actually been healing there. Oftentimes what we'll see is some strength deficits, maybe mobility, nerve tension is a big one as well. And we see this in many disorders. In the vestibular system, we want to ensure that a vestibular hypofunction actually resolved, or that a migraine is under control. So that is how we build resources. We investigate and then we actually address those things. We don't want to ignore that the person may have some underlying physical limitation that's contributing to the aberrant neuroplasticity. So all those pieces come together. So from that soil optimized for neuroplasticity, that's our sleep, fitness, systemic health, watering, that right sensory input. So we can go wrong with too much or too little. The pruning, so we're going to reinforce positive connections, undo aberrant connections. Then we're going to go to the weather, take into account the person's belief, their culture, what does their family say, how do they understand the diagnosis, and we're going to build resources, build up strength and nerve dynamics and flexibility, address any of those underlying issues. And that is really our recipe for how we can cultivate central nervous system connectivity for people in neurologic disorders. So I hope you found that helpful. I love a good analogy. You see us with a lot of these because I think it's helpful to have like 5 or 6 analogies to help explain these things for different people. This one's really helpful for the gardener for sure. And I see somebody on here who, hello Khalil, who's like avocados rock. Avocados are my favorite, by the way, and I love having an avocado tree because when it is in bloom and when those avocados come, I watch them ripen. We pick them every week. I'll eat like 1 a day. They're amazing. And that's what we want to see in somebody's nervous system. When the soil is optimized and they've got the compost and the weather is good and we pruned it and they're getting the right amount of water, we see fruit. We see fruit of our nervous system. And that as a neuro PT, like that is just a dream, is to see that fruit really like come to fruition, right? So I see Khalil says he has a couple of avocado trees and loaded this year. How lucky are you to have that? May we see the same in our nervous systems. Let's load them up and really get that central nervous system connectivity. Thanks so much for joining me for this live today. Again, this diagram, if you're a PT, OT, healthcare provider, we're doing our course in October, our weekend course, and today is the last day that you can join us for that course at our early bird rate. And we hope you will. There's a link in our bio. And thanks so much for joining us. Hi, Tatiana. I'm going to be sending you an email later today, but I'm so glad you joined. And again, thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to me. Send me a message if you have questions about our Cultivating Central Nervous System Connectivity course, or just how we do this as neuro PTs and OTs. This is stuff I love to talk about. So have a great day, and I can't wait to see you later.